what we found was that the majority of people, about three quarters, experienced being frightened, about 60% experienced sadness, and a little over half, felt their body shake or tremble during their psychedelic experience. Quite a few people said things like, there are no bad trips, there's just difficult trips, and even the difficulties have value. So I'm not a therapist, but I'd really like to see, could therapists or guides use these experiences for benefit.
Welcome to Mind, Body, Health, and Politics. I'm your host, Dr. Richard Lewis Miller. The mission of Mind, Body, Health, and Politics is to enhance your physical and emotional well-being and encourage community. And I say encourage community because I believe that human beings are basically tribal animals, and we live the healthiest when we live in tribes. And I do believe tribal living is going to come back because of economic reasons as well as health reasons. I believe tribal living is a concept that has merit and is worthy of your consideration. Today on Mind, Body, Health, and Politics, I am so excited to have Dr. Daniel Kruger from the University of Michigan. And why am I so excited? Well, partly because I once taught at the University of Michigan, and Daniel and I are going to chat about that, but also because, as many of you know, I've completed a book on psychedelic medicine adverse effects, and it's already at the publisher. However, because of Daniel's article, which you're going to now hear about, I'm putting the brakes on because we've got to make room for what he is going to tell us about today. Welcome, Dr. Daniel Kruger.
Thank you, Richard. It's wonderful to meet you, and it's wonderful to talk with all your listeners.
Daniel, before we started formally, I was telling you that how I was late to get into our interview because I was coming from a weightlifting session and that I lift weights 4 days a week. And I do so not because I'm any great aficionado of weightlifting, but because I've been taught by our fellow scientists that we lose muscle mass every year. And if we don't do something to maintain it, we get weaker and weaker. And you made a very strong comment, which I'd like you to come back to, if you will.
Yes, I said that just about everyone needs more exercise than they currently do today. Maybe there are people who are, professional athletes or aficionados at the top who do have adequate exercise, but we have really lost out due to the technological innovations and changes in our environment that have really kind of removed our daily exercise routines from our normal lives. Our ancestors evolved at a time when you used to walk a lot and hunt and gather, and physical activity was pretty continual. And certainly there were more strenuous or vigorous activities like the weightlifting that you're doing, but oftentimes it was just walking or aerobic exercise, sort of low impact exercise.
Yes.
That kept people healthy. And
yes,
and now we have so much time pressure and we have so much convenience in our lives that we've unfortunately lost out on that. So I fully agree, and I like your analogy of the tribal life, because in this tribal lifestyle, you have exercise built into your day.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we agree on that. Let's move on to your study. Daniel, I'm hardly know where to. I'm stunned. I'm stunned by some of the things in your study. And before we dive into the details, such as the percentage of people who experience sadness or loneliness or some other adverse effect, give us a little background. How did the study come about? How did you put it together? There are a lot of people on the authorship.
Mhm.
Give us some background and then bring us in. But you could do a little of Tell us what you're going to tell us, then tell us, and then tell us what you told us, and then we'll wrap it up.
Sure, sure. And I'll try to give you the short version because I could probably talk about the origins of this project for over an hour. So we are very interested in expanding the public health scope related to psychedelics. And we see a great need for informing the public and informing policymakers so that we have, evidence-based policies and practices. The psychedelic scene has emerged really rapidly, much faster than policymakers are used to. And we
Ask me why.
see,
Ask me why I'm laughing so hard.
because you know what I'm going to say, and this
No,
resonates with you, yeah.
no, it's because for you in your career, the psychedelic scene has expanded very rapidly. And I agree, and I know what you're saying. But from my perspective, we've been struggling with this for over 50 years of suppression of psychedelic science, and it seems like it's moving very slowly. So both are true. It's moving both rapidly, depending on your perspective, and very slowly. We
Yeah.
just, we just got turned down again by the FDA. The first time I was there with Rick Doblin in 1985 when we got turned down. So that's 39 years of turn down. To me, that's slowly. At the same time, what you're seeing is very rapid, the expansion of science, right? And
Well,
studies.
yeah, you're completely right about that, about the background. And yes, I'm referring to the very rapid policy changes and above ground research,
Uh-huh.
the
Above
kind of
ground, right?
research that's visible to academics.
Yeah,
And to loop back around, I mean, one of the reasons why we're conducting this project in general, the larger project that this one study is part of, is to really acknowledge the many decades of work and knowledge that's been built up in the psychedelic community and bring that into the light, meaning to take all this knowledge and all this information that people across the psychedelic community know about and bring that into, what we'd consider the mainstream academic system, so that this knowledge, these resources, these can be shared, more easily with the kind of outlets and platforms that academics and other folks use today. Another aspect of it is to amplify the voice of the psychedelic community in shaping the future of psychedelics. As we talked about, there's a lot of research going on now that's happening really rapidly, and much of it is focused on clinical trials. That's the process for taking substances, maybe psychedelics and psychedelic derivatives, eventually to market as pharmaceuticals. So that's happening, and at the same time, we think that the psychedelic community has a lot of knowledge and has a lot of guidance for how psychedelics should unfold, especially given that so much, most or almost all current psychedelic use is still outside of regulated, therapeutic supervised context.
definitely, unquestionably. So, your segment of the overall larger study that you're referring to is on adverse effects. So, give us a description of what you did, and then let's dig into some real details.
Sure. So we conducted a survey with over 1,000 psychedelic users, and at the time there were anecdotal reports about adverse experiences. People had written about these before. People had written blog posts about this or that incident, but at the time that we designed the study, there weren't any systematic, like, large scale survey studies to find just how prevalent this is and who's encountered it. So we built this into our survey and collected data from over 1,200 participants. It's a completely anonymous survey, so people don't, have to worry about, sharing information because their identities are being protected. But we asked people, because at this time, um, people talk about the psychedelic hype bubble, and there's this notion that the pendulum was swinging because after so many years of repression, that psychedelics were back, and then their news, and there's all these glowing news stories in the New York Times and other outlets about how psychedelics might be the next generation of psychiatric medication.
Yes.
And that may all be true, but people are getting all excited about this. And let's just say that there's going to be a great demand for psychedelics for people who want to have these experiences, and they want to use them therapeutically. um, but yet we don't have widespread access to safe regulated treatment facilities, right? And even those that do, in Oregon, um, and emerging in Colorado, these can cost tens of thousands of dollars for these therapeutic courses of treatment with psilocybin. So
In
uh,
addition to the cost of traveling to Oregon and Colorado.
right. So our thought was that most people, 99.9% or more, are still going to be using psychedelics. We say naturalistically, and by that we just mean it's not in a clinical context. It's not supervised by health, medical or health officials. And what we wanted to do was really share information that could be helpful for people. And not that we think we're going to put the brakes on the psychedelic movement, but to really balance out these glowing stories that we're hearing with just a little bit of caution. And the thought was that people really need to see science. They really need to see evidence based advice, because there's been so much misinformation about psychedelics in the past, even from the health authorities, right? So we heard that LSD damages your chromosomes, right? Or you might remember the work. This might have been around the around MDMA, where there was that fellow George
Rica-
Ricautra. Is that how you pronounce his name?
Riccardi.
Riccardi. Yeah, like
I
like like Bacardi, but not as fun, right? Uh,
I
so
I was at his one of his first talks in
yeah,
San Francisco when he had those slides showing the neurotoxicity of MDMA.
right. And it looked like it ate holes in the brain, right?
Until such time as now, you will tell us what happened with Riccardi.
Well, it turns out that they didn't actually use MDMA. They didn't actually use ecstasy. They used lethal doses of methamphetamine, crystal meth. So it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone what these results were, had they known that these researchers were actually using crystal meth. Now, he says, oh, it was an honest mistake. We mislabeled the bottles. You know, will we will we ever get to the bottom of that? I don't know. But his results, let's just say, were very marketable and very fundable, given the atmosphere of the era, right? So there's just a huge focus on uh, adverse effects, and anything that looked really bad could be really marketable. So there's been decades of misinformation, and just like with cannabis, then if people start to use it, and then they realize that, oh wow, this isn't anything like all these scare stories that I've been told, they might swing to the other side and not think that there's anything bad or risky, or potentially harmful. So that was our thought, is that, well, we want to have a balanced perspective, and across our papers, because we have other papers, on other topics and from, other angles, but we wanted to at least give voice to the possibility that people would have these difficult experiences, to inform them of it, so that they don't go in to the psychedelic experience thinking that I'm going to float float through the crowd through the clouds, or float down the river, and then an hour in they're having a panic attack and they don't know what's going on. They totally didn't anticipate this. So we wanted to investigate just how frequent are these adverse experiences, and we were looking at a whole range of experiences, from everything from just sadness to actual experiences of abuse, because that was one thing that was starting to emerge at the time, uh, was these stories of inappropriate sexual contact by people who were some sort of psychedelic guide, or maybe even an indigenous practitioner in South America.
Yeah, before we get to that, uh, the article opens up with um, data on sadness. 74.3% of the respondents, and you again give us the number, over 1,200 in your final list of respondents, was it?
Right. We had 1,221 participants who
Yeah,
completed
12.
the survey. So,
Okay. So 74.3% of them uh, said that they had experienced sadness, and then 54.3. Correct me if I wrote anything down mistaken, but um, felt their body shake or tremble, and 51.6% said they experienced loneliness. And I have a question about are seeing these emotions and feelings as adverse effects. I could make an argument, and might, that feelings of sadness and loneliness are not easy to experience in our culture, and there's a high probability that most of us have stuffed a certain amount of sadness and loneliness into little compartments somewhere, so that it doesn't bother us as much as we might think, but we don't really express it because there's lack of cultural avenues, shall we say, for expression. And
mhm.
so, what the psychedelics do is put us in touch with these suppressed, if you will, in Freudian terms, with these suppressed emotions and feelings, we call them electrical energy in some way at the foundation, right? And it put the psychedelics facilitates our connection with these inner sensations, and allows us to feel them. And then, if you have an experienced guide with you, the guide might just throw in a word like, give voice to your sadness, let your feelings show of sadness. Um, Allow yourself to feel what it's like to be lonely and share it with me. So I'm not so sure those things are adverse effects, whereas some of the other things that you report are more adversarial, if you will, to me, such as extended periods of anxiety, extended periods almost bordering on panic, and I know of cases like that. And then, of course, the big baddie in the room, sexual misconduct, right? And you go into some detail, and I'd like you to talk about that, if you will.
Sure. So there's a lot to discuss here. Yeah, what we found was that the majority of people experience this sensation. So about three-quarters experienced being frightened, about 60% experienced sadness, and a little over half, felt their body shake or tremble, or felt loneliness during their psychedelic experience. And this is actually an area I'm fascinated by, because even in our survey responses, so we also give people lots of opportunities to tell us what they think about these issues, with open-ended questions. And quite a few people said things like, there are no bad trips, there's just difficult trips, and even the difficulties have value, or this is just part of the healing process. So that is a perspective in the psychedelic community, that these experiences could somehow be beneficial. And this is a good question for me as a researcher. So I'm not a therapist, and I'll say I'm agnostic about your theoretical models until we have some data on it. But I'd really like to see, to what extent, could therapists or guides, use these experiences for benefit. Now, given that we're talking about people who are having experience where they have a guide or a therapist, and how they could be, guided through, with prompting. But we're also thinking about the people who are just going off into the wild, to do this. They may be going with friends, they may be by themselves, they may be in, more, festive situations like parties, or festivals or concerts, but they don't necessarily have someone who is an experienced, knowledgeable or professional guide
But
to assure
yes,
them through these situations.
but what they do now have because of you is the possibility of reading that these experiences might occur so that when they do, they are more prepared to handle them. They can
Right.
identify them. It's one thing to get suddenly ice cold and, gosh, what's going on with my body that I'm suddenly ice cold? It's another thing to get suddenly ice cold and remember that they read in Daniel's article, oh, yeah, I might get ice cold from taking this LSD. It's okay. It'll go away in a little while.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
Right?
that's part of our aim, is to really inform people and tell them, like, prepare them. Yeah, you might get anxious.
Yes.
You might feel like you're dying. You
Yes.
might think that the state you're in, is this going to last forever? So be prepared for that. And it's, that even that in itself, that knowledge, that precognition, that this is, this is not unusual for this to happen, right? It may not always happen, but it often does, and it's expected to have difficulties. And in a way, it's also, helping inform people about not you know not not getting too deep into it, like, don't be too concerned about this, don't about this, this feeling or reaction, so they don't get into like a downward spiral and just get, deeper and deeper into panic.
Yes, in fact, you mentioned, of course, the big biggie in the room, which is, dying. And I can almost guarantee there's no such a thing as a fuel guarantee, but I can almost guarantee that if you take a large dose of LSD, you're going to have a near death experience. It goes with the territory. And it's much better to be prepared for that in advance than to have it come on as a surprise.
Right. Right. Yeah. And I appreciate the advice that, the people who have came before me have given, set and setting,
Yeah.
uh, you know, relax and float downstream. But to somebody, and these might resonate with the psychedelic community, who understands the message already. But to someone who's uninitiated, to someone psychedelically naive, what does this mean? Turn off your mind and float downstream. Like, am I
Very.
going to be in the, I'm going to be in the inner tube or a kayak or something? Like, we want to give practical, useful
Yes.
information.
Yes. Definitely. Yes. Anything that's woo woo sounds like you're sitting in the Himalayas in a loincloth. I agree with you. Um, let's talk about 33% of your responders knew someone who was arrested for possession of psychedelics. Now, when I extrapolate that 33% to millions, perhaps, of what you call naturalistic users, I would guess that there's a certain level of fear floating around with regard to getting arrested. Is that right? I mean, how do you read that?
Yeah. For one, you still hear reports about, people being arrested. There are areas that are decriminalizing, like Ann Arbor, Michigan, and other areas. But this is something that is still has pretty substantial legal consequences if someone gets caught with an illicit substance. Even if it's for their own personal use. Uh, it is a challenge, and uh, this is also something that we don't know here what the true base rate is, because somebody could have 30 friends, right, and like one of them was arrested. But I mean, looking at crime statistics would give you a better grasp of just what portion of the population
I see
has
what
been
you're
arrested for
yeah, this
psychedelics.
thank you. I see what you're saying. This could be skewed data. Yeah, right. One arrest and 30 people saw it. Mhm. Mhm.
But yeah, the case is that so many people did personally know somebody who was arrested. So
Yes.
this person is in their social network.
It also makes me wonder if there are arrests going on, but because they're so minor, they're not even getting into the newspapers, so they don't come to our attention unless we do the research that you're referring to and dig into the arrest records.
Yeah, yeah, quite possibly, and especially if it's someone, it's their first offense. I think the law enforcement has much higher priorities than someone who's growing mushrooms in their basement or something. So, we'll see. We'll see what happens with that. There's some ballot initiatives that have been coming through. The one recently in Massachusetts didn't pass, but I don't think that will be the last, ballot initiative. And we'll see what happens, with other areas. In Ann Arbor, it was actually the city council that deprioritized enforcement of the laws criminalizing psychedelics. So it was, an interesting situation where the local government actually enacted this.
So they didn't quite decriminalize it, they deprioritized it. Is that
Right,
right?
and yeah, and my legal colleagues like to make that distinction because the laws are still on the books, right? It's still technically illegal. It's just that enforcing these laws is going to be the lowest priority, or sometimes
Mhm.
they say we're not going to expend any financial resources on
Yes.
enforcing these laws.
Mhm. Sure. Well, that's similar in effect to the fact that although um, Oregon and Colorado have changed their laws, uh, everything that they have legalized or decriminalized is still illegal at the federal level, and they could swoop in at any time if they chose to and arrest people.
Yeah, and you know what? That's true for cannabis as well.
That's right.
And now there are more people living in US states and jurisdictions where cannabis is legal for adult use, without any prescription, no prescriptions, without any recommendation from a physician, uh, for adult use for people 21 and over at the state level. Then there are people living in areas where cannabis is fully illegal, right? So that's a very interesting situation. But again, it's still federally illegal. It's still Schedule One, just like psychedelics. And right now, the federal government has, this policy. Maybe it's unofficial. How well is this codified? Is a good question. But as long as people are following the state laws, we're not going to get involved. So we'll see what happens in the future with that.
Yes, we will. Let's move on to other adverse effects.
Sure. Well, we we saw quite a few things that people experienced, and there's a general pattern where people are saying that yes, they have experienced this. They've experienced being frightened. They've experienced sadness, isolation, or loneliness, even panic. And the majority of people say that they have experienced these sensations. However, it's it's typically, rarely or sometimes. So most people who do have these experiences, it's not like their entire experience is filled with this, but they might feel like it at times, right? Uh, and and then a much smaller proportion of people say that this happens often, very often, and less than 1%, say anything happens always when they always take it. I imagine if they had these terrible sensations always, every single time, then they might not do it again. But things that are less common. So,
Well, what, I want to share one thought with
uh-huh.
you. I wonder how many other activities, if we gave them the same questionnaire, we would get similar data. For example, if we asked people who've gone to the movies for the last 10 years, and what percentage of them would say they've experienced sadness or loneliness or feelings of trembling and shaking?
Yeah. Well, movies
Interesting
are
perspective.
designed.
Yeah.
Yeah, movies are designed to evoke these emotions in us. Whether it's a horror movie or even a romantic comedy, people could be on the edge of their seat as
Yes.
things are happening. Yeah, no, so it's very true. And at the same time, uh, psychedelics are amplifiers,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So you might experience something, but you might experience it much more intensely than you typically would, like if you were just in the movie theater or reading a book. And that's another reason why we wanted to, get this message out here, because these are altered states of consciousness that we're talking about.
Yes.
And the words on the paper might not even do justice to the visceral experience that someone is undergoing,
Well
saying,
said.
okay,
Well, definitely. Well said. Yeah. I want to move on in our interview to the adverse effect of sexual misconduct because
mhm.
it's such a big topic in our country, in the world, and it's important that we talk about it. And you have some great data here to share with us.
Yeah, yeah, this is one of the challenges that we will face, going forward as a field, because of, just uh, the like I said, the amplification of everything with psychedelics, and just how altered these experiences are, where people might become vulnerable, and even the professionals, may become vulnerable, maybe not having any ill intent going in, but uh, a lot of a lot of times, psychedelics can even amplify sensations like touch, right? So we have to have good guidelines about what's therapeutic touch and what's not, and you know making sure that we have full consent. Talk about boundaries before the sessions. Establish consent, establish mechanisms for having people back off, even if you're nonverbal. If you're in a state where you really you really can't communicate verbally, how can you communicate to someone that, okay, back away or some such? So we need to establish these things. And therapists, anyone who's in a professional role, it's always important, so it's never not important. But it's extremely important with psychedelic therapy to respect boundaries, and to continue to be professional and in a professional relationship, knowing that there are certain lines you just can't cross, you shouldn't cross, even if it seems to be right in the moment, because everyone seems to be fine with it. if you're a genuine therapist, if you're really helping someone, there's certain lines that you have to know in advance that this is a wall that you just can't cross.
Yes, I think right now the accepted standard protocol for licensed people and others who want to include themselves is that you tell the person beforehand that I might touch you, and if I do, it'll be on the shoulder or on the hand
Mhm.
only, and I'll never touch you anywhere other than on the shoulder or on the hand. And then if the person consents, then during the session, if it seems appropriate, you might give them a touch on the shoulder or the hand. And I think that's an attempt to do what you're talking about by establishing
Mhm.
guidelines that'll be acceptable nationally. Um, but getting back to your data, um, I analyzed it in terms of percentages of the possibility of having a misconduct if you're a client looking for someone, and
Mhm.
it looks like it comes to if you're with an underground guide, which is the ones in your study that had the highest percentage of misconduct, a significantly higher percentage than the licensed people, as I recall, who were about 7.4%. But with an underground, your chances are 1 in 20 that you're going to have some kind of sexual misconduct based on your data. And then I looked at the national data for licensed doctors and therapists, and it's about 1 in 800. So there's a very a large difference, which really supports what your data, which shows very large differences between underground and above ground with regard to the training. Correct?
Yes, I mean it's correct. Also, I will say that again, this is asking, do you know anyone, including yourself, who has been the victim of inappropriate sexual conduct? So it also could be someone they know rather than themselves. However, we do think that uh, when you have something going underground, this is when you don't have your regulation or control. So if you have something and there's huge demand for it, then it's almost like the worst thing you can do is suppress it, because then it goes underground and then you
Yes.
have no control over what goes on. And then certainly a criminal element could come in, people who have only their own financial motivations in mind, and don't really care about what happens, with the people who are asking for, whatever it is that they want, right? So this is that's where a lot of danger comes in, also because when this is happening underground, a lot of people might not report it because they're in fear for their own legal jeopardy. Like, oh, well, this happened, but I was doing something illegal, so am I going to get in trouble? So that's one of the challenges when you have things that are occurring outside of these regulated spaces. And certainly, who knows what kind of real training or credentials or even ethics somebody has, if you're just going on the internet and declaring yourself a shaman, and collecting customers.
D- Do you think that the very engaging in the illegal activity creates an adverse effect itself or not?
Well, it certainly increases risks. If you're doing something illegally, then there's always the risk of getting caught. And then, like you said, it might contribute to paranoia. Like, oh no, well, what could happen to me here? I'm doing something illegally. I could get in trouble. I could get caught, and that could psychologically, amplify, anxiety, paranoia, concerns, etc. Um, but I'll just say that the legal status of substances hasn't always been based in science, right? So there's the studies, by David Nutt and colleagues who have asked experts in substance abuse research to rate the harmful effects of various substances, right? And guess which ones are the most harmful in terms of potential for addiction and harmful effects to individuals and harmful effects to society.
Nicotine as number two. I'd put coffee as number three. That's the those are the that those would be
Yeah,
my top three
yeah.
in
Well,
terms of addictive potential.
mhm.
Yes, for the widest number of people.
Right, right. Well, in terms of the health impact and the public health impact, yeah, alcohol and tobacco, those are right at the top as having the largest health impact. And in terms of addictive potential, some of the usual suspects like heroin and nicotine, those are certainly up at the top. But believe it or not, cannabis and classic psychedelics actually look uh, very favorable in comparison to many legal, recreational, and prescription drugs. So that's one thing that we would like to see policies and regulations follow the actual harm and actual harm potential for these substances.
Daniel, I'd like to see that study. That sounds like an interesting study.
Yeah, I can forward them to you.
Yeah, please do. That'll be fun to take a look at. So, in summary, in summary, what is your group saying to the public right now? Put you on the spot.
Mhm. Sure. So sometimes if you're having a psychedelic experience, you might feel uncomfortable, you might feel anxious, you might feel like you're in an unreal state and you're worried that this is going to be your life for the rest of your life. Or you might be worried that this is your life and this is the end of your life. Know that this is natural in the sense that other people have experienced these before, and know that you're going to get through it. And prepare yourself, prepare your mindset, prepare your intentions for the experience that you're going in. What do you want to achieve? What do you want to get out of this? Prepare your environment, to be as conducive to the experience as possible so that you won't have telephone linemen interrupting you, but banging on the top of the building. Maybe rent a cabin way out in the middle of the woods. Get away from the city so that you won't be disruptive to others around you, and other people who are not going through this experience won't be disruptive to you. Turn off your phones. Just prepare your environment to be conducive to the experience, and know that sometimes you will have these we have these difficulties, but know that you will be there on the other side as well. So you will get through it. And to follow up with this, we're very interested to hear from you and to hear from others about how people have been able to get through. What have you done? What have you done, and what have you found helpful in addressing and getting through these difficult experiences?
That's a great question. And another question is, and I'm save this one for the last before we close. Why do you think so many people are taking these risks? Why are they taking the risks, even including throwing in the misinformation? Why are
Mhm.
they taking the risk that maybe they'll jump off a building, the tallest building in the world, or why are they taking the risk that they may get arrested? There's something's going on that such a large number of people are taking these risks. And what do you think the reason is?
Well, we've actually studied that, and we have a paper that we hope will come out very soon on
Oh, can't
people's
wait to see it.
motivations. But what I'll say is that there's a whole diverse list of motivations for why people take psychedelics, and oftentimes it is just out of curiosity they've heard about this, they've heard great things. Oh, I want to experience that too. So in a way, it could be sensation seeking, it could be intellectual curiosity. Um, but more and more, what I'll say is that, uh, especially as people get older, the motivations seem to shift towards a therapeutic, a therapeutic motivation. So young people take risks. I mean, this is something that we've known, throughout history, that adolescents and young adults tend to tend to have the highest rates of accidental injuries and auto accidents and such. So risk taking kind of peaks in those late adolescent and early adult years, and people just want to experience things and experience sensations. And especially if this is in the news, if you're seeing this in the New York Times, and
Hmm.
you see really respected authors like Michael Pollan writing books, how to change your mind, and you read this and
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
you're just enamored. So it's out there in the last few years, like you're saying, this has been going on for decades, but just in the last few years, it seems to be a major topic, even in the general mainstream media. So a lot of people are now paying attention to this. And maybe that's one of the reasons why we seem to have the highest levels of psychedelic use ever in this country right now.
Sub rosa psychedelic use over the last 40, 50 years. And I published it in a book called Psychedelic Wisdom. One of the people in there, Dr. Alan Ajaya, when I asked him about his taking LSD over 900 times, and he's now, as I am, in his 80s, I said, Alan, are you going to continue taking it? And without missing a beat, he said, of course. And I said, over 900 times, and you're going to take it again. How so? And he said, there's always more to learn.
Yeah.
I thought that was a great answer. That's why I shared that story with you. There's
Yeah.
always more to learn. Anything you want to add about the study before we sign off, Daniel? So, any last minute, if you're walking out of the room and you think to yourself, "Oh, I forgot to say that," or "I wish I would have said that," take a pause and see if you have any of those floating on your radar screen.
Well, we'd be glad to hear from everyone out there, because again, part of the point of this project is really to help collect all that information and knowledge that may be underground, maybe sub rosa, as you say, and really bring it into the light and reach out and connect the psychedelic community, and have what we call community based research. So we want to partner with the psychedelic community to do the kind of research that the psychedelic community thinks is important, and share information that the psychedelic community thinks is important to investigate and share. So please go to the website, and we look forward to hearing from you, and sign up so you can also participate in the next survey that we have.
Daniel, thank you very much for being with us today on Mind, Body, Health, and Politics. It's been really a pleasure and a lot of fun.
It really has. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate your interest, and I'm glad that you're taking this initiative.
And thank you all, gentle listeners, for being with us today on this broadcast of Mind, Body, Health, and Politics. I remind you that we send out a newsletter that you want to subscribe to, mindbodyhealthandpolitics.org. Just send us a little note and we'll get you on the email list. I want to remind you also that all our programs are archived and they're open source. No charge to you. Mindbodyhealthpolitics.org. Until next time, this is Dr. Richard Lewis Miller, reminding you that good health is worth fighting for, and it's essential for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.